Welcome to part 2 of my interview with Dr. David Jacobs on The Richard Dolan Show. This is available for members only at richarddolanmembers.com. David, thank you so much for sticking around for a little while longer.
Well, thank you for tolerating me.
It's been a lot of fun. Tracy's laughing here. So I know we have a little bit of time, and I want to make the most of it. Tracy wanted to jump in first with a question, so why don't you just do that first? You want to come right on in here?
Sure. I think I'm going to be asking this on behalf of a lot of people because in your books you frequently refer to the mantids, the insectolins, the reptoids, and the greys, and other people have reported other species, and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that, if you haven't come across them or if you feel those might be screen memories.
When people remember things consciously as they're describing to you, without serious questioning under hypnosis, they tend to remember all sorts of things that turns out not to be true. And they feel sometimes embarrassed because when they come to me and they do a session with me or a couple of sessions, they realize that what they've been telling people for years just wasn't true. They thought it was. They were doing what they thought was the best thing, but there weren't these the types of aliens that they described and those types that they described, those weren't there. I've said this many times before, but one time I did a session with a woman who was heavily into how these aliens are extremely nice and good and kind, and they look this way and they look that way, and on and on and on and on. So we did a session, and she was abducted in the middle of New York City at night, which is not unusual. And she's taken on board, and this happened to her, and that happened to her, and this happened to her, and that happened to her, and then they brought her back down. And everything was fine. And then about a week later, I got a letter from her saying she was never coming back to see me because she didn't remember what she wanted to remember, which was these wonderful, adoring aliens who loved her and she loved them and all the rest of this stuff. And it was going to be wonderful. But I was just asking her the simple questions: what happens next?
Right.
Yeah, there's a definite ideological component to how we are approaching this subject in many, many ways. But Tracy, you wanted to ask him about the hooded beings.
Yeah, I for my own reasons, I just wanted to know if you've ever had, whether it was screen memories or whatever, people reporting hooded beings.
And do they have
Yes.
faces?
And that would be my second question.
Okay, this is actually more complicated than I'm aware of, that's for sure. Gray aliens do not wear clothes of that nature. They're not hooded. The question is there anybody else on board who is hooded? The answer to that is we are not exactly sure. We do know that some of the insectolins wear robes of all things, considering that they're very thin. And various people have drawn me these insect-like ones with robes, and sometimes tall aliens in robes, and the robes look alike. And nobody's aware that anybody else has ever drawn anything like that. So it is possible that they wear robes, hoods. That is not discussed. People don't see hoods normally.
That has not been in your research. You have not come across hoods.
Okay.
I have not come across hoods.
Okay.
Interesting.
But robes I have, and I've got various people drawing the robes for me who were not aware that other people were drawing them, and they look pretty much alike, I have to admit.
Have you gotten hoods as screen memories or initial memories? You know what I mean?
I've done so many sessions with people. I'm trying to remember if that ever ran across me, and my brain is shrunk to the size of a walnut, and I can't remember a damn thing anymore.
Okay, first of all, that part is not true. So, but secondly, okay, so you're not remembering hoods offhand. So that says enough right there. So we can just let that. Can I ask him a question here?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious about. You taught at Temple for a long, I don't know how many years, 40 years plus, I guess.
Well, almost. I taught at the University of Nebraska for 1 year, then I taught at Temple, and the aggregate was 37 years, I guess.
Okay, long time. And I mean, I know at least, we talked a little bit here and there, and I've certainly gotten the idea that your time at Temple could have been more pleasant had you not been doing UFO abduction research. I guess I'll just say that. What was the I'm sorry?
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
How would you characterize the academic mindset toward A, UFOs, B, abductions, and C, you personally? Like, did you pay a real price by doing this within the university setting? And what can you say about this?
Yeah, I was extremely lucky. I led a very lucky life in many ways, I must say. But I was extremely lucky. I managed to get tenure. That means that they could not fire me.
Yeah.
Just based on my first book, The UFO Controversy in America, which was my doctoral dissertation with an added chapter and some other added information. And that book allowed me to get tenure, which meant that they could not fire me for virtually any reason, unless it was a horrendous crime of some sort. Not only that, but Temple University also had a union for academics. So not only did I have tenure, but we had a union, and there were people at the university who wanted to get rid of me, even though I was tenured, and that never came to fruition. It never even started. I had a friend of mine who was on a committee with them, and he told them that if they continued to act this way towards me, that I was going to sue the hell out of them. I'm using kind words here,
right.
As much, and they stopped. But I knew also that if I went into the abduction world, I would never make what's called full.
Yeah.
If for people who don't know, when you first get a job at a university, you're an assistant professor. That means that you sign a contract every couple of years to spend another couple of years there until about 6 years. And then after 6 years, the committee votes on you as to whether they want to keep you or not. And oftentimes it's a not, and then you have to go to another university somewhere, or you work at a gas station,
Yeah.
So I understood that. So that's assistant. I'm sorry. Associate means you have tenure, and right. I was given tenure, so I was associate professor of history. Full professor is just plain professor of history. It means that you're well known in your field, basically. People, you've read a lot of books and this and that. I knew I would never make full professor. I knew that I was giving that up when I started going into UFO research. I tried just for the hell of it, but no, not a chance.
Wow.
Not a chance. Yeah. And so, but that was okay, because this was far more important work that I was doing than anything I could do at Temple University.
Absolutely, David. There's not a question about that. What's the attitude about that other of your colleagues would have? Did you have allies at Temple or elsewhere within the university system? I'm guessing you must have had some, but were most people by and large hostile, or how would you characterize that?
Most people were very nice, because this is a university, and they may think that I'm a moron or that I'm some sort of creep or something or whatever I am, but most people were nice, but virtually no one ever brought up the UFO phenomenon to me.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to know.
Right.
It's like they're just not engaging.
Nobody seemed to be interested in that. Isn't that amazing? So
it was like some of my early family reunions in the early years when my relatives are like, so how those Yankees doing, Richie? And I would get that, and nothing. It's a little different now. I have some relations who are actually interested, and they'll ask me better questions than probably your former colleagues would ask you.
Well, my former colleagues didn't ask me any questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Never came up. The subject never came up. Now, I taught a course called the UFOs in American Society starting in 1977, before I went into the abduction research world. Yeah. And I continued to teach that course through the American Studies program, and then as another course in the history department, without that name, but it was a course that was regularly scheduled. And so I taught that class from 1977 to 2011 when I retired. The only course of that type in the United States. And I assumed that there might be more eventually, but not a single regularly scheduled full credit upper level for graduation course at the university, and
Yeah.
that has not happened before or since.
Wow.
I'm assuming that was a popular course,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming also that there's just like no. It almost seems like the academic world is much worse in many ways in terms of engaging some of these new issues. I don't know if there's a professional pressure on these people. I'm sure there's a lot, but in my early years, I was very idealistic. I thought, oh yes, I'd like to go on, finish my PhD, get a teaching job, because the university is where the ideas are fought out in an open market, and people just are completely willing to discuss anything, and that didn't really turn out to be true in my experience, and obviously not relating to UFOs.
Right, and that's academics now are. There used to be a whole group of academics who are interested in UFOs and abductions. Oh gosh, my brain.
Mm-hmm.
A group of academics, Jim Harder,
Yeah.
and Leo Sprinkle,
Yes.
and others were interested in UFOs, abductions. There was a whole slew. I wrote a paper once for MUFON. I think it was in 2001 that I went down and gave the paper. And I had looked at something like 1,800 different academics who were involved with UFOs in some way or another, or 1,500, whatever it was. And now there's only one UFO organization. It's MUFON. That's the national organization with any standing, basically.
Yeah.
And its population, I don't think has increased much in recent years, and there's no organization for abduction research of any sort that I know of. And well, there's this free group, but they're not UFO people in it. There are some, but most of them aren't. And so the situation is now worse than it's ever been before in terms of academics. I've never seen anything like it. You'd think it would grow through the years as more and more people get used to it and get interested in it. It's been the opposite.
Interesting. Wow. And you were in that world in such intimate detail. You would know. It's disheartening. It's like so many things about academia, actually, but that is a disheartening thing. Tracey, you wanted to ask something else too.
Well, I was just curious because I went back for that degree recently, and there was no discussion of anything like this. I was just wondering how popular that course was. I'm assuming it was super popular with students.
It was super popular.
Of course it was.
In fact, I taught a whole bunch of different courses at Temple University, and graduate courses, mainly undergraduate courses, and I taught this UFO course. People still contact me who took the UFO course 25 years ago and want to know what's going on. And nobody from any other class calls me anymore. But people still call me, students that I don't remember having or not, and to ask me about what's happening with the UFO world. So that course was popular, to say the least.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I wish, maybe... It would be amazing if you published, something from that course. So maybe somebody would pick it up. And I don't know. Just it's sad. I created an organization when I was just in university because I wanted people to be able to discuss anything like this. And I sort of masked it as a dream group. And I brought Richard in as a guest.
Oh, I did a guest lecturing stint there, and the entire psychology department just went out of their minds. Like, who is this UFO guy speaking in our school? We were very, very upset about it. The department chairman just
almost lost the
wet himself over
organization
this.
It. So. Yeah, it's kind of a sad state, but I just wanted to know because it was one of the fastest growing organizations that the school had ever seen. I think because so many people were drawn to the fact that they could talk about these things that were not talked about. It was just about unusual experiences. And I just left the doors open with out of body, near death, lucid dreams, and I wasn't inviting abduction, but I was just inviting a dialogue that doesn't happen at school, and they loved it.
The students loved it.
The students loved it. They were craving it. They wanted it. They wanted to talk about the things that were going on in their lives that weren't covered in psychology and pathology. So
it's just what you're describing is a situation of academics now. It's the exact opposite of what a good academician is. They're supposed to be interested in unusual things. They're supposed to try to figure out what these things mean. They come in, they're supposed to be intelligent people. But when it comes to things that go bumper in the night or UFOs or things like that, it's poison for them. They won't go near it. It's awful, terrible.
Yeah, and honestly, in our previous segment of the conversation, you were talking about how we are really overmatched by this phenomenon, and the fact is, one of the institutions that we would need on our behalf would be the world of academia. We would need them to work with us to deal with this phenomenon, and they just that whole community just seems to be so behind the curve, so just unwilling to look at this. Honestly, I see no hope for the academic world, frankly.
In 1977, when I formulated this course for UFOs, and it was for the American Studies program, and I talked to the chair of the American Studies program, and he thought it was a great idea. It passed, no problem.
Wow.
Oh.
Now it is not possible to have a course on UFOs for any university in the country that I know of. It's just not going to happen.
What happened? What do you think was the change in this culture?
I don't know. I don't understand exactly what happened in the society. Maybe it's because everybody has 150 to 3,000 channels on their TV now, and there's all sorts of stuff about UFOs and flying saucers and this and that. Most of it being junk, and it's just it's wound up in a downward spiral of just popular culture.
Yeah.
If I can image that in some way.
I think the academic world just acting in total fear. They're just afraid of reputations, and it just seems like such a horrible state of affairs. It's disheartening.
The most amazing thing is that if they're right, and this is all just nonsense, and yet you have people around the world all describing the same things and saying the same things, you'd think that psychologists and psychiatrists would be interested in it from that point of view.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
The answer is no, nothing.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Crazy.
Well, I'm trying to think of anything else to wrap this up with, David. I know you've got to go.
I have one more question.
Tracy's got one more, if she can
I was
do it.
Well, I was just wondering if you think by any chance that there could be a possibility of a competition of species, that the change and the takeover doesn't have as much to do with taking over humanity as perhaps some other species that might already be present here, and this hybrid program being some sort of means to deal with a different species. I guess what I'm saying is it's not so much about us, that maybe there might be this competition thing going on.
Yeah, that's backstage stuff that we don't know about, and we don't get any information about that from our little friends up there. So, but I would imagine that it makes sense to a certain extent, but at the same time, God knows how many billions of Earth-like planets are out there, for people to take over. Right. So we just don't know. It's an interesting thought whether there's competition for any planet like us or not. But there's no way we can know that unless they in some way tell us that. And the only ones who would tell us that would be the insect-like ones. Oddly, they are more they talk more in longer term. They talk more than gray aliens do.
Yeah.
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 And so, but we don't even know whether they know something like that. We don't know who's controlling them, if anybody is. We just need more backstage information, and it just doesn't come. People don't describe what's happening behind the scenes and all that.
One thing that makes me crazy with this subject, honestly, David, is I was mentioning to you earlier, I was going back through some of the early UFO sightings. I mean, there were no organizations doing reports back 500 years ago, but there were stories and there were people who observed things. So we have these, early UFO style types of stories that have come down to us, and I've tried making sense of them. I'm sure you have as well. And there are certain patterns that have emerged. Like there's no stories of gray aliens going back hundreds of years, but there are some very interesting sightings of what I would call UFOs, whether in Japan and China hundreds of years ago or medieval Europe, of stars that split into 3 different stars and then recombine and take off. Like that was reported. Now, I don't know how reliable some of these reports are, but we have them. And it just makes me think there has been a presence of some intelligence here for a long time. But that would be a different scenario than what you're researching, and I just don't know how to fit it all together.
Yeah, it's a tough one because there's the only evidence you have is fixed. There's no, you can't expand on that evidence.
No, right.
And obviously there can't just be one other species out there who's more advanced. There's got to be millions, if not billions of them. And and we're discovering now that there's one hell of a lot of planets out there, many more planets than there are stars. And so consequently, there has to be obviously many different advanced species, much more advanced than we are, because our technology, it's not brand new, but in the higher context of things, it's just begun. It's only a couple of 100 years old.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about a couple thousand years old, knowing that I have in my pocket a camera, a video recorder, and access to the internet, I have these sort of amazing things that we've done now. But if you're 1,000 years ahead of us, then it's all magic. And so it certainly is conceivable that other beings might have flown here and looked us over and flown back. But this is the only group of beings that is, in fact, staying here for the general purposes of creating humans, human-like beings, and living here with us, and then eventually talking about a change that will take over, that will happen, wherein they will take over. And this is a takeover of a planet that is probably happening all over the place too. But we just have to keep in mind what's going on here in the here and the now, And when you go back a couple of 100 years or 500 years, it's still guesswork, even though there's things that come together and then explode and come together. It's still guesswork. It might very well be UFOs in the sense that we know them. Yeah. But we'll never know.
No, we won't. It's the limitation of the information there, and there's nothing we can do about it. I agree. It is interesting. I guess the last question we'll ask you, I know you have to go. In the limited amount of time that we may have before the change, what practical measures, what can the field of abduction research do, or what is needed moving forward?
What is needed is for all of these scientists in the world who have half a brain to get together and try to figure out how we can stop what is going on. This is probably not going to happen. It's not a long shot. It's a trillion-mile shot, and this has been going on for at least 100 years. So they're all well on their way to doing whatever they want to do. But I still think that in some way there might be some protection for us, for the planet. But I don't know. I just don't know. We are still in the face of an extremely advanced technologically advanced species who's done this before. This is routine for them, my guess is. And we have been feeding right into it, doing exactly what they like, which is pay no attention. Everything is fine.
Yep.
I think if we can't figure that out, what about in the short run when people are asking, how can they help out in the field? Or if people are interested in getting into abduction research, at least I suppose that would be one way that we could expand sort of the workforce examining the problem.
That's fine with me. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, a person visited me from France. He'd never been to the United States before, although he was living at this time in the Caribbean, an island in the Caribbean. And but he's French, and I taught him how to do hypnosis with abductees, and he's going to start doing that in France. They're moving back to France soon. So I'm doing what I can, which is not a whole heck of a lot. There's only a few of us in the whole country.
That's the sad thing. I know. What do? We need more people.
All right.
Right. Absolutely. And there used to be, but now there ain't.
Yeah. Well, I hope you are able to create that book you were talking about, the instruction manual, I think it was.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yes. Don't lose any sleep over that. This is. I average a word a week.
Listen, I live the same dream, David. I've got people asking me, "What about the next book?" I'm like, "I'm working on it." All right. Well, look, David, I want to thank you again for this extra interview. I know your time is precious, but I really just want you to know I have so much respect for your work, and I'm very, very glad we had this opportunity to have this conversation.
Thank you kindly. I appreciate that, and I certainly appreciate your inviting me too.
Absolutely. All right, David, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, David.
Bye-bye.
All right.